close. Welcome back to Notemon, everyone. This is part 2 of the Hogwarts Crest woodburn tray. We are starting off by taping off the bottom edge of our tray because the next part of this is adding resin and I didn't want any leaks going through. So I just used painter's tape, made sure it was secure, and made sure I really covered all of the bottom edge creases to make sure that there was zero leakage. So for this next part, I put some gloves on because we are going to be mixing resin. Now, fair warning, I am not a resin artist. This is my first real major art project with resin, and you will see that I made some mistakes, and honestly, even though it was frustrating dealing with the mistakes that I made, I'm really glad that it was all filmed so that this really is hopefully a journey for everybody watching as well as me figuring out how to do these projects when you've never done them before. So I got this really awesome resin kit, and it came with a bunch of silicone molds as well as this silicone mixing cup, which is what I'm using to measure out the resin that I'm using. Now, the resin I'm using I bought at Walmart. It's called Glaze Coat from Fama Wood. If I can find a link, I'll put it in the description below for you. This is a 1-to-1 resin, meaning you mix equal parts. So I just measured out some resin, how much I thought I was going to need for this section, and stirred it all up, mixed it together. It takes some time to mix. The instructions say 6 minutes. I recommend doing the full 6 minutes of mixing because then you'll get a clearer resin. Once your resin's all mixed and to perfection and everything, this is what I started with as the base coat, because a lot of the resin videos I've seen when doing resin on wood, you want to seal the wood so that you don't get a lot of air bubbles in it. So that's the goal I was going for. So I poured this and then brushed it around with an actual resin brush from a project I did years ago. Once you have your resin coated, it's a good idea to go over everything with like a blowtorch or a heating gun. Even a blow dryer will work, but it helps bring any bubbles that you might have to the surface and pop them. This also helps with the crystal clear resin casting. Once you've got that done, you want to put some sort of cover over top of it as a dust protector basically, and then it takes 24 hours to dry. Now here, this is where the mistakes started happening. I don't know if it's the glue that I used. What I'm trying to do is section off one portion of this crest for a color effect. And I've seen a lot of videos where people just use hot glue as a barrier on resin and it just peels off. So that's what I did here. You're going to see later. I did something wrong. I don't really know what, but I did something wrong. So even though you see me doing it in this video, I would not recommend applying the hot glue directly to a single painted coat of resin. Maybe that was my mistake. So I mixed up another batch of resin, and this time I'm adding red glitter for the Gryffindor portion of the Hogwarts Crest. Once I got that resin with the glitter to where I wanted it, I made sure that my tray was sitting level, and I poured this portion of resin within my hot glue boundary walls. And then I spread it out, trying to make some sort of a splatter effect design, which didn't end up happening, but I really like how the tray ended up, even though it didn't stay where I wanted to, and that's because the resin ran a little because it is self-leveling. So overnight when it set, it ran a little, but I was, like I said, I'm still really happy with how it turned out. So here we are on the next day where I'm peeling the hot glue barrier off, although it did not work. It took a lot of effort to get this off. I ended up cutting almost all the footage because who wants to see me sit there and struggle, but I ended up having to use an X-Acto knife and my torch to soften the hot glue to be able to remove it all the best that I could. And I know that there was still some that I couldn't quite remove, but it didn't work as well as I had said, like I said before. So what I ended up doing for the second portion of this was applying some painter's tape along that line, and then putting the hot glue barrier on the painter's tape in the hopes that I would be able to remove it with the painter's tape below it. It would just peel off like tape. It worked a lot better. There were still a couple flaws, but I would definitely choose this option again versus just the straight hot glue. So for the Ravenclaw corner, we're doing blue glitter. So pretty. I really do love the glitter effect. I can't wait to experiment more with resin and add like pigment colors and stuff, but for this project I wanted it to be pretty clear and see-through because we've got that woodburn design that we did. So just like with the red glitter, we're going to pour the blue glitter over the Ravenclaw crest portion. And same thing, spread it out, get it to where you want it, make sure that it's level, cover it overnight so that you've got the dust cover, and pop your bubbles. Here, the tape removal, as you can see, it did work a lot better than what I went through with the other side, but it still was a little bit of a struggle. I'd use some tweezers to get out some pieces of tape, but in general, I think it went well. Once the tape was removed, I mixed up the yellow and the green for Hufflepuff and Slytherin. Since I have the barriers on the two corners now, I don't need to apply any more barriers. It'll just level out to the level of the other two squares that have already been cast. So I didn't need to apply any kind of like hot glue or tape or anything like I had done for the first two. So I just mixed up my yellow and I mixed up my green, and then we poured them, and again, I keep saying we, like it was multiple people, it was just me. Sorry. What was I saying? Oh, right. Yes, mixing resin. So I mixed the resin up and then poured it in its appropriate squares, and again, I made sure to pop the bubbles with the torch and then covered it and let it set overnight again. I had a lot of fun editing this one, trying to figure out how to do split screens to save time. Hopefully the effect is pleasurable and So once all of that was set up, the next day I came back in and I did another coat of clear resin to seal everything in. I actually did 2 layers, but I didn't film the second one because I feel like that's all you've seen in this video is me pouring resin, and you didn't need another portion of that. But I did do 2 resin pours on top of this just to give it that solid top base, which is an oxymoron, I realize as I say that, but hopefully you understand what I'm going for. Once all of the resin has dried and set overnight, came back and I removed all of the tape that I had to seal all the edges in, and the fun part begins with sanding. Along the seams of this, Gryffindor and Slytherin tried to take over the entire project. I had to tame it back a little bit, so they're thicker layers, so I had to really sand a lot of the seams together to make it that flat, smooth top that I was looking for. I started at 150 grit and hand sanded everything, including the wood, and then I went to 220 and then to 400. Once I got all that done, I got to play with another new toy. I got some micro mesh. Micro mesh goes from 1500 grit to 120,000 grit. It's really exciting to use. I've never used it, but I've seen a lot of other resin YouTubers use it, so I was excited to test this out. And I just did a little bit of a water bath to make it slide across the resin easier, and it really shined up the whole project really well. So I just worked my way up the grits, and I had to wipe halfway through, get some of that water off, and then restart it again. Once all the sanding is done, all that was left was to put my creator's mark on it, so I wood burned it. Obviously you can see here I got a little off camera. So I just put Notemon 2020 and my personal signature for any artwork that I do. After that was done, more gloves, because we're going to finish the wood and the resin to make it all shiny and pretty. To treat the wood, I used boiled linseed oil. It's a really nice product to use to really bring out the golden honey color of a lighter toned wood like this. I've used it for over a year now on different wood burning projects that I do. It just, in my opinion, on bare wood burning, it just makes the wood burn part really glossy and pretty, and it deepens the color a little bit, but it also brings out the really pretty natural colors of the wood. When you're done using your linseed oil, it's very important that the towel or rag or whatever you're using to apply the linseed oil, put it in an airtight container. Whatever you have the linseed oil on, make sure it's in an airtight container with no air inside of it. A lot of times people will throw their linseed rags in like the corner of a garage, and with the air chemical reaction it actually can start fires. So you want to just make sure, I always put it in a Ziploc bag and then make sure I release all the air out of there, and then you can throw it away. It won't have that chemical reaction. To completely finish everything off, I'm going to be using this Wipe On Poly, which is like a polyurethane top coat finisher. Just makes it a little bit shiny, protects the wood a little bit, and also it's going to shine up the resin that we just sanded. So here it is, the final product. All nice and glossy and shiny. I really love how the glitter catches the light with the ring light that I have on it. The wood grain has come out beautifully and it's just really showing its character. This is going to be perfect for serving treats on. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this journey with me. I learned a lot. I hope that you've also learned a lot. If you enjoyed this video, it would really mean a lot to me to share it with some friends. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Notemon, and also I have a blog at www.notemon.com.